Senator from Iowa.
Today, Senator Johnson and I will present our third speech on the Biden investigation series. Today, we will focus on James Biden, the president's brother. Hunter Biden wasn't the only Biden family member who had connections to the Chinese Communist regime. James Biden did as well. Before we begin our discussion, I think we need to mention the main company once again, the Chinese company that goes by the initials CEFC. In the first two speeches, Senator Johnson and I established the connection between CEFC and the Communist Chinese government. We established the connection between CEFC and Hudson West 3. We then established the connection with Hunter Biden's Owasco, Hudson West 3, and CEFC. We showed that Hunter Biden and James Biden actively assisted CEFC as it worked to expand its footprint and its holdings in the global and U.S. energy sector. And today, we'll add James Biden's Lion Hall Group to the list of Biden family companies connected to the communist regime. In my and Senator Johnson's September 23rd, 2020 report, we showed that Hunter Biden and James Biden and their aligned firms received approximately $4.8 million from Hudson West 3 from August 2017 to September 2018. During that same time frame, Hunter Biden's Owasco sent 20 or so wires to James Biden's Lion Hall Group. Those 20 wires totaled just about $1.4 million. The liberal media and our Democrat colleagues originally tried to claim that Johnson and my findings were Russian disinformation. Last week, the Washington Post reported the following, quote, over the course of 14 months, the Chinese energy conglomerate, here parenthetically they're referring to CEFC, and its executives paid $4.8 million to entities controlled by Hunter Biden and his uncle, according to government records, court documents, and newly disclosed bank statements, as well as emails contained on a copy of a laptop hard drive that purportedly once belonged to Hunter Biden, end of quote. The Post also reported this, so I start the quote. During that time period, about $1.4 million was transferred from Hunter's account to the Lion Hall Group, the consulting firm that James Biden ran, according to other government records reviewed by the Post. End of Washington Post quote. Senator Johnson and I were right 2 years ago. We knew it then, but it's been a long road to defend our work product. The liberal media and our Democratic colleagues aggressively tried to make the case that we were peddling Russian disinformation. Now, what will the liberal media and my Democrat colleagues say now in light of last week's Washington Post article that substantiated the work that Senator Johnson and I have been doing? We still haven't received any apology from our Democratic colleagues for their false claims against us these past several years. They haven't apologized to the American people, and I'm not going to hold my breath. When will the big-time media in Washington awaken to respect my reputation for the thorough investigative and oversight work that I do as a senator? And it's also my constitutional responsibility to do exactly that. Now, we have more records to discuss today. Today, Senator Johnson and I will show you financial transfers direct from Hudson West 3 to the Lyon Hall Group. In other words, in these transfers, Hunter Biden's Owasco isn't the middleman. So let's look at the first poster here. This is a January 2018 bank statement from Hudson West 3. Now, there's a lot going on here, so I'll just mention several items. First, we've got two examples of more wire transfers from Hudson West 3 for $165,000. The underlying wire data, which Senator Johnson and I will make public this very day, shows that money went to Hunter Biden's Owasco. That money was for the August 2017 LLC agreement, which, by its terms, saw James Biden become a manager of Hudson West 3. That agreement sent $100,000 to Hunter Biden and $65,000 to James Biden every month. Those transactions occurred after the $5 million wire from Northern International Capital to Hudson West 3 on August 2017. Northern International was connected to Yi Jinping, who was connected to the communist regime. Now, we explained all that in our second speech just last Tuesday. Second, this statement shows several examples of wires from Hudson West 3 to CEFC. As Senator Johnson and I have established, that company is an arm of the communist Chinese regime. This new record shows how closely connected Hudson West 3 was with CEFC, while Hunter Biden and James Biden received money from Hudson West 3. Third, we've got a January 17, 2018 wire to Lyon Hall Group. Now, that happens to be James Biden's company. James Biden received $18,000 from Hudson West 3. The same month, that company sent money to CEFC. Now, this is just one example of many. Accordingly, the official bank record makes clear the financial connections between and among James Biden and the communist Chinese elements. To the liberal media and my Democratic colleagues, is this the official bank record Is that Russian disinformation, as you accused us of spreading? Now let's go to the second poster. This is Hudson West 3 bank record from April 2018. Here you see wire transfers from Cole Harbor Capital. That company was connected to Merwin Yang, who was an associate of Yi Jingming and Gong Wen Dong. Now, as Senator Johnson, as I have already established, all of them are connected to the communist regime. These are the players in the game that I mentioned in the first speech last Monday. And now we've established they appear repeatedly in bank records with high dollar transfers. These transfers aren't by accident. No way. There's clearly a scheme here. There's a plan among and between all these individuals and their respective companies, which then begs the question, has the Justice Department acquired these records? If so, what has the Justice Department done about these records? Now, moving to the next transaction, there's another $165,000 wire. Again, that relates back to the LLC agreement that connected Hunter and James Biden to the Chinese firm CEFC and its projects in the energy sector. Then you have a $34,000 wire to James Biden's Lion Hall Group from Hudson West 3. So what was this all about? Let's take a look then at the third poster. Now look at the sixth line from the bottom. I want to quote. It says, office expense and reimbursement. That's the same reason given for the first poster that I showed you. We'll make all of these records public again this very day. For those of you who may still doubt my and Senator Johnson's oversight work, I'm going to present one last transaction to bring all of this home. So look at the fourth poster. In my and Senator Johnson's September 2020 report, we found that James Biden and Hunter Biden went on a $99,000 global spending spree, courtesy of who? Another Chinese person that I've mentioned so many times in these three speeches, Gong Wen Dong. The spending spree included airline tickets, purchases at Apple stores, hotels, and restaurants. This bank record next to me shows a $99,000 transaction in September 2017. But that's not all that we have. Let's turn to the final poster. This is number 5. This is a credit card authorization form for $99,000. So look at the bottom. There's the signature block with Hunter Biden and Gong Wen Dong. Now, to the liberal press and my Democratic colleagues, are these official records Russian disinformation? So what's the point of all these records? Not only have Senator Johnson and I illustrated through new records that Hunter Biden was financially connected to the communist regime, these records show James Biden was as well. These new records show direct financial links between companies connected to the communist regime and James Biden through Lion Hall Group. These new records support the findings in our report to the last Congress. Remember, those reports were put out in September and November of 2020. And everybody was saying it was Russian disinformation. Forget the facts. Forget the evidence. Forget the investigative journalism. The liberal media wanted to provide cover for then candidate Joe Biden. They did whatever they could to smear our investigations. With these new records, there can be no doubt that James Biden was financially connected to the corporations and individuals with extensive link to communist China, and that he and Hunter Biden were in it together, working to help a Chinese government-linked energy company pursue deals and expand its reach in the energy sector. Now is Senator Johnson's turn.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. What Senator Grassley and I have shown over the course of 6 speeches are the actual bank records of financial transactions tying President Biden's son, Hunter, and his brother, James, to businesses that are essentially the arms of the communist Chinese regime. But the Biden business ventures include activities in many more countries than just China. In our September and November 2020 reports, we showed a vast web of Biden family foreign financial entanglements that were largely ignored by the media and falsely labeled Russian disinformation by our Democrat colleagues. As outrageous as the suppression of our reports and the false attacks were, perhaps the most egregious behavior came from 51 former intelligence agency officials who lent their names and reputations to an effort designed to convince the American public that Hunter Biden's laptop had, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation, unquote. Without any evidence backing their assertion, they engaged in their own, quote, information operation, unquote, by signing a public letter right before the election. Their letter was actual disinformation, coming from what are supposed to be trusted former members of our U.S. intelligence agencies. They shall be ashamed and held accountable for spreading this disinformation. By signing that disinformation letter, they reinforced false claims that the records on the laptop were not legitimate. By casting doubt on evidence of the Biden's corrupt practices, these former intelligence officials interfered in the 2020 election to a far greater extent than Russia could have ever hoped to achieve. Their willing accomplices in the press amplified this disinformation letter, and by doing so, were equally guilty of egregious election interference. In August 2020, I wrote a public letter detailing the history, purpose, and goals of my oversight investigations. In that letter, I laid out the timeline of Joe and Hunter Biden's involvement in Ukraine. The timeline is very revealing. It starts in February 2014. That was the month of the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine. 2 months later, on April 16, 2014, then Vice President Biden met with his son's business partner, Devin Archer, who is now a convicted felon at the White House. I just want to pause and just let that sink in a little bit. Devin Archer is now a convicted felon He got a meeting in the White House with the Vice President of the United States. That's kind of a big deal. The press didn't ask many questions. 5 days after that meeting in the White House, April 21st, Joe Biden visited Ukraine, and the media described him as, quote, the public face of the administration's handling of Ukraine. The next day, on April 22nd, Devon Archer joined the board of Burisma. What a coincidence. On April 28th, 6 days later, British officials seized $23 million from the London bank accounts of Burisma's owner, Mykola Zlochevsky. Let that sink in a little bit. 6 days after Devon Archer joined the board of Burisma, a day after Vice President Biden visited Ukraine, which was 5 days after he met with Devon Archer in the White House, British officials seized $23 million from the corrupt owner of Burisma. On May 13th, 2014, 3 weeks later, Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma. What a coincidence. Because of the findings in our reports and the excellent investigative journalism on the part of John Solomon, we also now know that Hunter was involved with Elena Baturina, the corrupt and now sanctioned wife of the former mayor of Moscow, during the exact same period of time. On February 14th, 2014, Baturina wired $3.5 million to Rosemont Seneca Thornton, an investment firm co-founded by Hunter Biden. Between April 4th and April 5th, 2014, again, the same month that Joe Biden met with Devon Archer in the White House, Devon became a member of the board of Burisma. Hunter Biden and Devon Archer sent emails about meeting with Baturina, potentially relating to a business deal in Chelsea, New York. On April 13, 2014, 9 days before Devon Archer joined the board of Burisma, Hunter Biden and Devon Archer discussed a potential deal involving Baturina. Archer wrote to Baturina, quote, confirmed green light to fund deposit, unquote. Archer continued, quote, just spent 2 hours on the phone with Kiev. I am confident at this point this is a good, if not life-changing deal if the Ukraine doesn't collapse in the meantime. It's quite interesting to see how much significant activity involving the Bidens and corrupt actors in Russia and Ukraine occurred within a 6-week period, only 2 months after the Ukrainian Revolutionary Dignity. It sure looks like they intended to cash in on the turmoil in Ukraine. In my August 2020 letter, I listed a number of questions about then Vice President Biden's interaction with Hunter Biden's business partner and other family members' foreign financial dealings. In making this letter public, my hope was that the press, the very uninquisitive press, would begin to ask then President's candidate Joe Biden these important and legitimate questions. It should come to no surprise that the corporate media was completely uninterested and failed to conduct any investigative journalism. Nearly 2 years after I wrote this public letter, the mainstream media has still not adequately pressed President Biden for answers to these very legitimate questions. For example, number one, why did Joe Biden meet with Devon Archer at the White House on April 16, 2014? What did they discuss? Did they discuss anything related to Ukraine, Hunter Biden, or Burisma? Number two, was Joe Biden aware that Devon Archer joined the board of Burisma 6 days after that meeting, 1 day after he visited Ukraine? Three, does Joe Biden believe Burisma and its owner are corrupt? Number four, when did Joe Biden first become aware that Hunter Biden also joined the board of Burisma? Five, when did Joe Biden first become aware of how much money Hunter Biden was being compensated by Burisma. Senator Grassley in my report showed it is close to $4 million. Number 6, what does Joe Biden know about Hunter or James Biden's dealings with China? Number 7, what does Joe Biden know about financial benefits his brother and sister-in-law have obtained because of their relationships to him? Investigative reporter John Solomon has added a few more questions to my list, including what? Number 1, what, if anything, did Joe Biden know about his son's dealings with Russian oligarch Alina Baturina? Number 2, in 2017, a series of memos referred to a Chinese business deal that involved Hunter Biden and included a 10% equity for the, quote, big guy, unquote. What did Joe Biden know about this specific deal and who was, quote, the big guy, unquote? Number 3, emails on Hunter Biden's laptop, now in the possession of the FBI, refer to shared accounts or bills between Joe Biden and Hunter. Did Hunter ever give Joe Biden any money, gift, or financial benefit from Hunter's business dealings? After a long overdue analysis, the New York Times and Washington Post have finally admitted that records from Hunter's laptop are authentic, which means, although they will never admit this, the Senator Grassley and I were right and they were wrong. It is interesting to read how limited and muted their mea culpas are. My guess is that they learned a lot from their coverage of Nixon's Watergate scandal cover-up. They learned that when you've been caught in a cover-up, and that is what has happened here, you try to limit the damage by telling a little bit of the truth. In the intelligence world, this strategy is called, quote, a limited hangout, unquote. The Watergate co-conspirators called it, quote, a modified limited hangout, unquote. Regardless of what you call it, what the New York Times and the Washington Post are doing is not telling the whole truth. I doubt they ever will. But just in case they decide to pursue the truth with a little bit more rigor, they can use the above list of relevant questions as a good starting point for what they should be asking President Biden. For our part, Senator Grassley and I will continue to ask tough questions, review more information and records, and transparently provide that information to the American public. We intend to pursue and uncover the truth. I will now turn the floor back over to Senator Grassley for his closing remarks.
Mr. President, I ask permission to put my closing remarks in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.